To protect the climate, we're changing in ways that might surprise you. We've turned to the most experienced fluid dynamics experts in the world to make airplanes more efficient. We're planning a heat pump the size of a soccer field to reduce our own emissions, blazing a trail with recycling technology to breathe new life into old electric vehicle batteries, and to power our own factories. We're building an offshore wind farm, the biggest in the world. To protect the climate, we're changing, getting inspiration from all kinds of places and all kinds of people.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainable by Design event series. This is week 2. Hopefully, some of you had a chance to join us last week for our sessions. This is the second and final week. My name is Ben Glavatsky. I'm the Sustainable Business Strategy Manager for BASF and your host for this event series. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We know schedules are tight, everyone's busy, but we do appreciate you joining us today. Sustainable by Design is an event series that we are hosting during this month of April to bring sustainability awareness to the forefront. We want sustainability to be at the design phase of whatever product or service is brought to market. So, in essence, let's design with the end in mind. As I mentioned, we're now in week 2, so including this one, we have 4 sessions left. We have one this afternoon as well, and then 2 more sessions on Thursday. So hope you can join us for those as well. Just some very brief housekeeping items before we get started. On the right-hand side of your console in the upper corner, you'll see some information about our speakers for today, so please take a look there. We also have any additional resources, links, or any downloadable items that might be available for this session would be just below that. So there'll be a box that you can look, and you'll see some links there and some information if there's anything available. We do have the opportunity to ask questions. So you have the opportunity to pose a question. We will see that. We will do our best to get to as many questions as we can. Our sessions have been jam-packed. We've been, I think, doing a pretty good job of answering our questions. Anything that we don't get to during the event, we will get to afterwards. And then finally, we do have a survey. So on the bottom to the right, there's an icon there with the survey. So we very much would ask you to please leave your feedback, leave a question, request for information, or anything like that. So I think without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Blythe Monica. Over to you, Blythe.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we explore the exciting topics around carbon capture technologies and clean energy, and how both are impacting the overall energy transformation occurring in the state of Louisiana. As been mentioned, my name is Blythe LaMonica, and I am the Senior Manager of the Southeast Communications Hub and based here at our Geismar, Louisiana site. I will be the facilitator of today's panel discussion. So let's begin and introduce you to who those panelists are today. Joining me is our own BASF's very own Kristen Campbell, who is Director of Site Development at the Geismar site and Director of Energy and Verbund Management for North America. Kristen holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Biological Sciences and a Master's in Business Administration from Louisiana State University. Thank you for joining us, Kristen. Jason DeQueer is one of Louisiana's top tax policy experts. In addition, he is co-owner and partner of Advantis Consulting and founding partner of Advantis Law. Mr. DeQueer has a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Howard University, which I have learned he was also an academic All-American and a 4-year letterman as a place kicker. We may have to talk about that, Jason. He also holds a Master of Business Administration degree from Louisiana Tech University, a Juris Doctorate degree, and a Bachelor of Civil Law degree from Louisiana State University, and a Master of Laws degree in taxation from Georgetown University Law Center. Thank you for being here today, Jason. Our third and final panelist is Jason Locklow, who serves as the Director of Louisiana State Energy Office in Louisiana's Department of Natural Resources. Mr. Locklow is currently serving as the Louisiana Coalition Representative for the state and Midwest region on carbon capture utilization and storage technologies, and serves on the executive board of the National Association of State Energy Officials. He is also leading Louisiana's efforts on hydrogen development and the multi-state effort to compete for a hydrogen hub. Mr. Locklow holds a degree in civil and environmental engineering from Louisiana State University and is a licensed professional engineer. Thank you for participating today, Jason. So let's get started. And since we have two Jasons, I'm going to refer to them by their last names when asking the question. So my first question is for Mr. Locklow. Can you briefly describe why Louisiana is the ideal location for carbon capture?
Absolutely. It's a great question to start off this session. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to speak with your team and a lot of folks who've joined today. So Louisiana has a great story to tell, and we don't always have a great story to tell, but on carbon capture, we have a tremendous opportunity to really position our state to be successful in the long term. And a lot of folks ask about carbon capture and geological sequestration and what really makes this mix and this dynamic so important, and why does it make sense to invest in a new business here? I've traveled all over the place. I've worked with a lot of other states. A lot of folks will tell you that Louisiana's geology is second to none. So we have unbelievable saline reservoirs that are deep underground, take a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide over time. So carbon capture and sequestration can work in a lot of different places, but a lot of times folks that have good geology don't have the necessary pipelines or the infrastructure to connect them to take the carbon dioxide that's captured and put it in a secure geological formation. Other folks, quite frankly, don't have the sources of CO2 to capture in the first place to use. So I think when we look at Louisiana, we average about 200 to 220 million metric tons of carbon dioxide a year. Over 60% of those emissions are from our industrial sources, and a lot of that is located near some of the best geological sinks in the United States. So we work very closely with the Carbon Capture Coalition that the Great Plains Institute has put together, a large, very diverse group of companies and NGOs. One of the first maps that I ever looked at when I started going to those meetings showed an unbelievable area that was shaded in maroon around the Louisiana Gulf Coast in Texas. So our onshore and offshore resources for CO2 sequestration have unbelievable potential. And we think that as we're starting to move forward, when you look at geology, when you look at the pipeline density that we have in Louisiana, the connectivity in industry, but also the expertise from companies such as BASF and others who are looking at this as a long-term solution, we're at really what we consider one of the most important inflection points in Louisiana's history when it comes to energy. We've been a producer of energy, a refiner of oil and gas, and someone who makes and manufactures products that we ship all over the world. And as we start to look at the future and trying to make sure that we have a plan for energy, geological sequestration in Louisiana is something that we absolutely need to put at the forefront of how we make decisions going forward. So we've been very fortunate just to have the political support to be able to do this. We worked very closely with a lot of our federal agencies over the last several years to make sure that we had a plan. And a lot of the things that we're looking at involves long-term sequestration of carbon dioxide. So you have to look at long-term legislation. You have to make sure that you have liability concerns that are addressed. And Louisiana has all of those things. And we're actually in a position to be ahead of a lot of other states. And we feel very strongly that having a rigorous permitting program and having the right infrastructure in place is going to lead to unprecedented development. We've seen some of that happen already. We work very closely with our Louisiana economic development agencies. We have seen firms come from all over the world that want to invest in Louisiana. And a lot of times what they're telling us is that predictability and in making sure that this permitting system is done the right way, like Louisiana has set it up, is going to be what drives that development to the state. And I think when we talk about that, These permits that we're talking about are referred to as Class 6 permits. It's a well class that is really put together just for addressing carbon dioxide through EPA's underground and injection and control program. So Louisiana has primacy, what's called regulatory primacy for class wells 1 through 5 already. We're going to be the third state in the nation that gets primacy for class 6 sequestration of carbon dioxide in the United States. This is going to change the entire dynamic of how we look at energy in the future. And I think that when we look at tools and we look at resources, carbon capture is by far the most advanced commercial utilization tool that we can use when it comes to emissions. So we have a lot going for us in Louisiana. The companies that really make up this dynamic in Louisiana, they're seeing this as a tremendous potential. The state is committed to doing this. And so I think that for us, this opportunity that we're looking at is going to be one of the most exciting things that we've worked on in a long time. So that's a little bit about Louisiana, and I'm hoping that folks continue to come to us and ask us these types of questions.
Thank you, Jason. And I wholeheartedly agree, all the exciting opportunities here in Louisiana. One follow-up question for you, though, is we've heard quite a bit of discussion around the safety of carbon capture sequestration. Can you just maybe elaborate on your thoughts about the safety of CCS for those that may not fully understand the technology?
Sure. So Blythe, that's a great question. And as we have worked with a lot of stakeholders and NGOs, it is by far one of the most important questions that folks ask. So there are a range of opinions when it comes to sequestration of carbon dioxide, but the reality is that this technology has been around for over 50 years. The industry has been injecting and basically storing products underground for a long period of time. This particular permitting program that's referred to as Class 6 is hands down one of the most rigorous permitting programs that has ever been put together by the federal government. We have been working with the Environmental Protection Agency for the last almost 4 years to make sure that our rules and our regulations and our liability concerns and our safety regulations are in place that are even more conservative than what the EPA has put together in their program. So it is not something that we take lightly. We obviously tell folks that when they're looking at projects, that the projects that are done in Louisiana, we want them done to a standard that is second to none. So the wells, the construction of the wells, how this product is being transported in pipelines, and how it's finally stored in these sequestration areas is absolutely, safety is paramount to how this is going to be done. So we move a lot of products and a lot of different things already. Carbon dioxide is not a new concept to Louisiana. We already have pipelines that run through Louisiana that are moving carbon dioxide across our state. So this is not something that is new. Obviously, we take this very seriously. Our pipeline division takes it very seriously. Our regulators take it very seriously. And part of that is us looking at this from a regulatory standpoint and going to our legislator over the last several years and requesting additional positions. We've actually added folks who are working just in carbon management who have expertise in this. You probably saw that several years ago, LSU has announced that they are actually putting a specialty program in their petroleum engineering department just for geological sequestration. So I've visited with these deans. The first graduating class is coming out next semester. Apparently those folks have had unbelievable opportunities. They're talking about these types of issues. Our staff is going through a very rigorous training program, and making sure that these projects are done the right way and that they're done safely is going to be at the forefront of how we approach this as a long-term solution for Louisiana.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Good information there. My next question is going to be for you, Mr. DeQueer. What was the longest field goal you made at the place for Howard University?
Put me on the spot. 51 yards. That was my longest field goal. I kicked that up in North Carolina. So I'm just hoping that I can drive one through the uprights here today on this panel. So.
I think you will be able to. So with you and your knowledge and expertise on tax policy, you obviously work with a lot of companies around building that business case for operating in Louisiana. So what, in your opinion, is the business case for companies interested in carbon capture technologies for coming to Louisiana and implementing them here in the state?
Yeah, thank you, Blythe. And again, I'll also want to piggyback Jason's comments and thank BASF and Blythe and Kristen and Ben for doing this and having Advantis as a partner. And I will tell you, before I even jump into the questions, one of the greatest things that we can do is educate and get information out about this arena. And y'all are doing that today. And that, we can't take that lightly. That's extremely critical, important. And thank you all for doing that. But before I dive off into what's comfortable for me, getting into the weeds of tax policy and economic development, just kind of starting at a high level. Obviously, the current president, almost day one in office, said, "Hey, we're gonna try to reduce the carbon footprint," and that began to, from Fed down to states, implement. I mean, you now have to implement these things in states, in parishes. And you had to start thinking about, are we set up, policies, that sort of thing. And the good thing about what happened here, regardless how you feel about the president, Democrat, Republican, able to put all of that aside and immediately launch a climate initiatives task force. And it was made up of state folks like Jason and DNR, DEQ, stakeholders, business groups. And we were able to come together immediately and start having a serious conversation about embracing clean energy, alternative energy forms, carbon capture. And I think that is what helped propel Louisiana to be on the, sort of the front steps of implementing this and being prepared as a state to move forward with this technology. When you break it down a little bit further and you start talking about the business case, obviously there are a couple sides to the equation. You have obviously the plant and facility, like where you're situated there, Blythe, and then you have the transportation and the pipeline aspect, and then kind of the newer aspects is the storage, and ultimately how can we utilize this? And if you're asking what breeds Louisiana of opportunity or business case, the plant and transportation side of it, the pipelines, we're already ready to go. I mean, when you talk about the number of companies that make up the chemical corridor, we're an energy-rich state, tons of oil and gas already. That means you come to Louisiana, we already have the infrastructure there. We have the workforce there. Our universities and technical colleges are already centered and geared towards the training, so you can immediately invest and know that you have resources that are aware of this arena and supplement that. So I think it's the most obvious case, but it's the biggest case that we have to preach. We're ready. We're here. The facilities, the opportunity is here. But in terms of also the business case, I think if you talk about the associations, the stakeholder groups, the Chemical Association, the Oil and Gas Association, even down to the chambers, have really come together and started having these discussions about how to move this forward in the appropriate way. And I'll also echo with Jay, we're going through a session right now. We're addressing those issues. As you know, you never want to waste a good legislative session. And so there are bills out there that are being filed to deal with the environmental issues, to deal with the inter-parish issues in terms of being captured in one parish and being stored in another parish. Obviously, the Speaker has a bill, HB 571, that is attempting to solve a lot of those issues, get out in front of a lot of those issues so that when companies come here, they know, or companies are here and invest in those dollars, they understand what the rules of the game are. They have some good feel or sense that their projects will go forward, won't get caught in the rut on political issues or division. There's still a lot of areas to go as far as that is concerned. But that's why I think Louisiana is ready and is out front to continue to invest these dollars. However, I will tell you there's some areas of improvement, right? I mean, we're not all the way there, and this is where we can't lose sight, take our foot off the gas, whatever pun you want to use. One, I go back to education. We have to do that. People still are unaware We talked about a lot of the safety concerns. There are a lot of myths out there, and a lot of that has to be debunked. Talk about the true science of it. But also, as it boils down into my arena, as you mentioned, Advantis helps companies navigate the state and local tax code. We also help with economic development opportunities. Right now, we have to modernize our tax code, and we have to modernize our economic development programs. I use the example with pollution control. When that was first the thing, now everybody controls pollution, but our economic development programs were set up to incentivize companies to do more with respect to pollution control. So our industrial property tax abatement programs had pollution control. Some of our sales tax code gave incentives for investing in pollution control equipment. The legislature started to take that stuff away and say, all right, companies, that's just one of your prime responsibilities. So now we need to modernize those programs to embrace alternative energy forms. We need to modernize those programs to incentivize carbon capture. And those are the things that we now need to focus on. Most of these economic development programs are set up if you are a manufacturer. Well, you may have one side of the company or the corporation that does manufacture, but is the transportation, storage, utilization also considered manufacturing such that you qualify for these programs? And it could get down into the weeds and whether or not you have a separate division. Is it all one company? But these are issues that are being discussed. And these companies, in terms of investing these dollars, are wanting to know if they qualify for a lot of these programs. And really, it's an area of uncertainty. So I think, as you see, as this session evolves, future legislative sessions and just the discussion, that's an area that we absolutely need to improve. And one last area is obviously with respect to modernizing our property tax code. When we're talking about storage and value and how the assessors are now going to come and determine what is the value. Is there any value? What is going to be the new property tax burden of this equipment? That is something that is being discussed and that we need to look at. Our property tax code is not set up to deal with that. That does create a little bit of uncertainty, and it could create somewhat of a chilling effect. So those are things that we must improve in. But all in all, I agree with Jason. We are primed to move in the right direction within this area.
So just to sort of reiterate a couple of your points, with the various stakeholders, both the local and state government officials, plus the trade associations we have here, plus industry, we're not only creating opportunities, but we're also creating solutions to some of these issues you just brought up.
That is exactly right, Blythe. This is an area, so many times Louisiana is looked at and we're the last ones to jump in this arena or the last ones to start creating common sense policies. I mean, I got to give the state credit and all these stakeholder groups, BASF engaging, the chambers. Look, as you know, Baton Rouge Chamber started a carbon capture alliance, okay? Just right here in the Baton Rouge region, we're looking at close to $30 billion of investment. We can't just let that investment sit idle. We now have to, whether it's environmental, whether it's infrastructure needs, transportation needs, tax code, economic development, we have to talk about it in a holistic fashion in order to continue to generate the types of investment and a catalyst for this state.
Thank you. Well said. Well said. Okay, we're going to switch to Kristen now. So we've heard a great deal from both Jasons around some of the innovation and the technologies and the solutions that are occurring around CCUS, both here in the state and in the region. As one of the people charged for BASF with leading some of these efforts, what can you tell us briefly about BASF's interest in CCUS?
Sure, Blythe, thank you. And first of all, I'd also like to just say thank you to Jason and Jason, because I'm honored to be a part of this panel with you. I personally look at both of you as being experts in this topic and also have really done a lot to help make Louisiana first. and have paved the path for us to do things for our sustainable future. But Blythe, maybe to give a little background to the audience, first about BASF's interest overall is just to tell you, first of all, if you haven't heard, one of our taglines is that we create chemistry for a sustainable future. We look to drive sustainable solutions, and that is our ambitions and part of our core value. And I also like to say sustainability here at BASF is really a part of our DNA. In fact, some of the largest sites globally in BASF were specifically designed to eliminate waste and to use every molecule to its fullest by ensuring that we put businesses that are synergistic to one another right next to each other. So inherently, we are looking at a sustainability model even from design, and also being as energy efficient as possible. So a little bit about our journey. Since 1990, BASF has almost halved our emissions globally already. And I think that speaks a lot to how this is part of a core value to us. It's not something new that's just come about in the last few years, but it's something that we believe in for the long haul. I'll say now we're really looking at the next two big milestones as our board has recently come out in the response to our customers and has really stated some strong, ambitious goals for us. So by 2030, as it relates to CO2, we have to abate 25% off of our 2018 carbon footprint. And by 2050, similar to others, we are looking towards net zero. But also another big pillar for BASF is we truly believe in a circular economy. So really using everything that we possibly can, recycling molecules to make the most of it and being as energy efficient as possible. But when you look at 2030, that's not a long way off. So what are those short-term things that we can do now? And we have to act now in order to reach that goal and to meet our customer needs and to do what we believe is right for our people, our products, and our planet. And I'll say, you know, we really look at it, and our approach is really, number one, of course, find ways to reduce our CO2 emissions altogether. So be more efficient. Don't produce it at all. Number two, like we talked about, we really want to use or recycle molecules. So what about the idea of carbon capture utilization, right? Where you can actually use CO2 to make something that we need. And so that actually is chemical recycling, if you think about it. And then finally comes in CCS, which you also can deploy today as a near-term solution by doing permanent and safe sequestration. It really, for us, I think it's about a portfolio approach. So it's CCUS plus other technologies. We also are looking at renewable energy. You know, the opening video you might have seen, deploying wind and solar where we can. I think for us to reach our goals, for us as BASF, but also globally across all industry and others, we need multiple tools in the toolbox. And I like to say it's not just about transitioning energy, but it's also about adding new, more sustainable energy to portfolio. So that's things like CCUS, clean energy, clean hydrogen, advanced technologies we're even looking into now to learn from others, like geothermal opportunities that may come about even here in Louisiana. We're learning from others about advanced nuclear, what that might mean long term. You know, what we really look for is what we can do today, but also what is the whole portfolio that we need to act now, looking forward already to 2050. And CCUS, primarily for us here in Louisiana, it allows us to make a large step change today. It also allows us then time to innovate, do more research, partner with others, deploy some of these advanced technologies as innovation then brings us along and evolves us even further. And that's really us taking action today while opening a door for our future.
Thank you, Kristen. I do want to, a good question came in, and I think it's along this line. We're looking at, you know, from the production side of things, but also the importance of, and I know you've been doing this work with a couple of the businesses already, is the connectivity of the CO2 reduction as it relates to our products, right? And sort of working with customers and some of the products that are produced further. Do you want to just maybe touch a minute or two on that and the work y'all are doing around that portion?
Sure. So a lot of our products can be coupled easily with some of these sustainability technologies today, just like CCUS. So some of our products, you can actually use CO2, and rather than buying something that's traditionally made, you can actually use CO2 to create that molecule, which makes it a chemical recycling storyline, which is what we really like. We also know that CCS really allows you to have confidence that CO2 that may be produced from production can be permanently sequestered. And so you no longer have to worry about that CO2 being once again emitted further downstream. And so CCS can be coupled with all the production that is needed in order to secure additional decarbonization and abatement of carbon dioxide.
Thank you. You brought up a great point in your response about looking at clean energy and renewables in the state. And so I'm going to segue to our next topic because we're about halfway through. So we can spend the second half talking about this. So Mr. Lonklow, can you expand? I know you did a little bit, but can you expand more on this idea of clean energy in Louisiana and what the state is doing to ensure clean energy is part of Louisiana's energy transformation?
Absolutely, Blythe. And I'd love to just pick up on, just to make a couple comments. Kristen brought up some really good points that I think just deserve a little bit of attention. So one of the things that we notice when we work in this industry is that the utilization piece to carbon capture, utilization, and storage is sometimes left out. That is extremely important for how we're approaching trying to do a comprehensive approach to carbon management. One of the most fascinating things that I've seen, we've been working with companies who are doing research and development on putting carbon dioxide in products like concrete. The other thing that we've seen is that the Middle East and Europe are producing steel with a lower carbon footprint by capturing carbon. We have folks who are looking at hydrogen production by taking a lot of those carbon molecules out of the process. Jet fuel is being produced, LanzaTech and folks like that. So there is a tremendous value to looking at this as a feedstock and making sure that we're looking at it. We can produce products that the world uses by utilizing carbon dioxide as a feedstock. So, and again, in a state like Louisiana that has a lot of carbon dioxide available, and we can't use one technology to go after our entire emission profile. And that when we talk about clean energy in Louisiana, I think that that's what is so compelling, is that there is a lot. Jason DeQueer talked a lot about education and talking, about connecting with the public. Our office, I'm very proud. We have two folks that go out and do what we call is an energy education series in schools. And the reason why I think that that's so important is that I've had the opportunity to, I've worked in flood protection and worked for our coastal agency for a number of years, and seeing what the impact of education has on young children. And folks in the Netherlands who live and work with flood control structures every day, when kids graduate, they have a very clear understanding of why the country spends so much money on protecting their resources, and protecting and investing in these structures. I think we need to do something very similar in energy to make sure that folks understand the demands and how these things have to occur in the processes to be able to supply clean energy to our households every day. The pathway to green, you'll hear me say this a lot, is not straight, right? So it's a complicated process, especially in a state like Louisiana. We have been around the 2% mark for production of renewable power for a long period of time. Over the last several years, you've seen Governor Edwards and Jason DeQueer mentioned our Climate Initiatives Task Force. That brought together a lot of very diverse opinions, but it also helped us to kind of formulate a plan on what we could do to move the state forward. When we talk about inflection points and talking about looking at a comprehensive strategy, these are things that we have to do, right? The biggest thing that worries me is that when you look at studies like Princeton and some of these other folks who've done very comprehensive analyses on what states look like if industry goes away or if a lot of these different jobs go away, these things are going to be driven by the availability of clean power. And I think at the end of the day, making sure that we're making offshore wind a priority, making sure that we're doing delivery of clean hydrogen, making sure that solar has opportunities for expansion in Louisiana, we need to make sure that this is being incorporated into our industrial sources. The other two things that I'll mention that are super exciting, we work very closely with the Department of Energy at a very high level, and they're going to be announcing very soon a very, very distinct initiative on geothermal energy. So there, we've heard of all the earth shot and hydrogen shot and getting these things where they're commercially scalable, where the price of production starts to come down. DOE is going to be very aggressive in terms of positioning geothermal energy. We have seen a lot of interest in geothermal. We've talked to a lot of different companies, but we haven't seen the investments that have followed. I think that when we start to look at carbon capture, 4 or 5 years ago, when the incentives were not such what they are now, interest was there and folks know we needed to do it. But I think geothermal is going to be that same type of resource. Folks are looking at this as a long-term solution, and I think that it has tremendous potential all over Louisiana. So the other thing that I think holds a lot of potential for Louisiana and for our plants is things like small modular reactors. The Department of Energy is doing a tremendous amount of research and development, but also implementation of making sure that these things are scalable, making sure that they are available, and that the permitting process will not take 10 years. So they see these things as priorities because delivery of clean power is going to be essential to meeting our long-term climate goals. So trying to weave a story about how all these different things can play a role is extremely important in Louisiana. But I think that at the end of the day, what we want people to realize is that each one of these technologies plays well with the other. And I think that putting them together, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. We can't in Louisiana just invest in offshore wind. We can't just do carbon capture. We can't just invest in hydrogen. These things need to work together and support each other. And that's what's so exciting. And I'll give you just a little bit of a preview for, we mentioned hydrogen in the opening. If you look at a lot of the models that are done, we wanted to think big when we started to look at climate and we started to look at decarbonization. So with the industrial corridor, bringing hydrogen, clean hydrogen into facilities and taking carbon dioxide out and safely securing it is a plan for our future. Bringing hydrogen in can have an immediate impact on lowering carbon emissions. And I think that for us, when we look at a very industrial heavy state like Louisiana, these are things that can set us apart, that allow us to have a long-term sustainability goal, be able to continue to be able to produce jobs and be able to continue to get kids excited about going into these fields and having opportunities after they graduate to be able to stay and work at wonderful facilities that are doing state-of-the-art research and economic development, but also producing products that the world uses every single day. So we have a lot going on. I think that our plan going forward, we're at a critical time for ensuring that all these technologies work together. But I think that when you look at the level of interest that we're seeing, we see a lot of companies who are saying, now's the time to invest in this. And you can do policy all day long in state government and also in the federal government, but unless companies are coming to the table and actually investing, that's when you know that there are things that are actually happening that are going to move the state forward. We're seeing that today. The level of economic development that we're seeing in clean energy projects is unprecedented, and we see this as being something that is not going to go away, but it's something that companies are going to start doing more and more of. And so we want to make sure as a state that we have the policies and the long-term vision to make sure that these things are successful.
Perfectly said. And this kind of segues for me into the next question I have for Jason, which is that mutually beneficial relationship between what the state is trying to do or the locals are trying to do and what the private sector is trying to do. So for Jason DeQueer, where does Louisiana need to invest to make clean energy attractive to companies? Okay. Second part of this question, what is the private sector's role in that transformation? What is their investment?
Yeah, thank you for that, Blythe. And I'm going to segue into that question right where Jason, the other Jason, ended up. And that's, he's exactly right. I mean, look, federal government, state government can make all the policies in the world. But until you get the private sector to transition or incentivize them, we just got good policy on the books. And it takes a true partnership to make that happen. I can use a simple example, COVID, okay? Federal government shut down, businesses had to shut down, and we had a lack of supply of items that we needed. Okay, and we just couldn't get those items out to whether it was PPE, whether it was hand sanitizer, we couldn't get those items to the public fast enough. They called on the private sector because they can transition quickly. You can make people were taking ordinary alcohol manufacturer that was manufacturing the stuff that we drink at bars and turning it to hand sanitizer shops. You know, people were converting their businesses to produce PPE equipment. Why? Because they incentivize those companies to do so. Hey, they called on them. Similar situation here. These are the policies. We want to reduce the carbon footprint. We want to move to different forms of energy. You incentivize, you give business, the private sector, the creativity to go out and figure this out and invest with them. You will find that this transformation will happen quickly. Now, where do I think the state needs to play a role? Obviously, we need to continue to invest in workforce. We need to continue to invest in our infrastructure. And we've got to continue to invest in the geology and science and all that stuff that Kristen understands, okay? Also, again, I emphasize our universities and technical colleges need to form that corridor, okay? We don't have to go that back far in history. Silicon Valley was created for a reason. The research park in North Carolina was created. This is our opportunity, okay? It's here, it's right there, we're set up, we have the infrastructure. Now we need to incentivize the private sector and also create the partnership that Jason's talking about in conjunction with that to further expand this investment and attract new investment. I will tell you from an economic development standpoint, I've seen this in other arenas. It is a race. It's competitive, okay? Because you have other states that are energy producers and that are also exploring this. And if those states get those economic development policies in place before Louisiana, or it's clear the direction that they're going before Louisiana, guess what? Those dollars follow those states or where their policies are, because businesses have to do that ROI. They have to understand, in addition to the environmental and the science, that if I'm going to invest dollars, if I'm going to invest our dollars into something, I need to understand what the ROI is that we're going to get out of that. And that's where they go. So that includes our economic development policies, but it also includes our state and local tax policies. I do think the reforms that we did in 2021 in terms of lowering our franchise tax burden, making our corporate income tax and sales tax easier to figure out for companies, all paints a part of a bigger picture to help put Louisiana in play. The other thing that I would say, just I spent some time at the Department of Revenue. Jason, I was on your side of the fence for 3 years in state government. I've seen this with other programs. You take the historic tax credit program to get real estate investors to invest in certain communities. That was a federal program. You're wondering why so much of that historic investment in Louisiana? Well, Louisiana piggybacked that federal program, created a state program, and now you're leveraging more of those dollars. Well, right now, not to get too far in the weeds, you have 45Q, which deals with carbon capture credits. That's a federal program. If we can create a state program that piggybacks 45Q and generates extra opportunity for businesses here in Louisiana, you're going to find those investment dollars come to Louisiana. So that's the other segment of the coin. In terms of the second part of your question, Blythe, what can the private sector do? I think we've hit on a lot of that. Again, not picking on Kristen, but a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information. BASF has those resources, has those competencies. Now, as Jason mentioned, we have to partner that with the public sector. We've got to do some grassroots. We've got to get out there, debunk the myths, let people know that we can do this, that it can be environmentally friendly, that it can be safe. Yes, you're going to have your naysayers out there that wish they would just drive oil and gas and energy out of the state. But this is the way that, hey, look, sometimes we got to sit in front of those folks and say, look, we can do this in an environmentally friendly way, in a safe way. And businesses is willing to adapt, okay? Obviously, Jason, I think you were going into this a little bit, but we've seen a big influx of private sector dollars at LSU, creating the LSU Institute for Energy Innovation. I think that's huge. I think that's huge because that's training our students over there at those universities to come out and be trained in this. And then obviously taking part in the interest of the advocacy groups. We talked about the state associations. We talked about getting involved with the local chambers. As the private sector, we have to play a role in that. They need to hear our ideas. We're the ones investing the dollars into this arena. And so those advocacy groups we need to be a part of. And then there's no greater creativity for this than in the private sector. I think we have some of the greatest creative minds, and we've got to utilize that. And then also implementing those common sense policies to continue the growth around carbon capture and different alternative energy forms. And I'll end with an example with Advantis, our own company. We were set up originally to handle manufacturing, your traditional manufacturing, industrial, chemical, oil and gas. We have adapted. We've brought on those core competencies. We've hired new employees that understand some of the science, the technology, to now match that with economic development programs, the tax code, and rebrand what we're doing so that we can kind of join the movement and be more enlightened to our clients as it relates to this industry, as well as how you can marry the two between the economic development and tax code. And I think every business needs to be thinking about that and how they can be a part of it and partner with it. And I think that's also going to help.
Thank you, Jason. And you bring up a couple points, and I'm looking at the questions coming through from our audience members. Some really good one, and you touched on it. And of course, me being in charge of community outreach for many of our sites, including Geismar, you mentioned the education component, but we can't forget that key stakeholder group, which is the public and the communities in which we operate, and the responsibility by the companies to ensure that our communities fully understand the technology, fully understand what is happening in these in the industrial corridor, correct? Can you mention or just touch on, again, really briefly, what you and your firm do to encourage that sort of community outreach to the members of the public?
Well, I'll give you an actual concrete example. It wasn't that long, I mean, it's recent, that solar started to move into the state. More solar companies were moving into the state. And I will tell you that caused a big raucous and uproar, particularly with the farming community. Is this now, because we're a big agricultural state. And so you got solar moving in, and it's going on a lot of the farmland and rural communities. Can we be agriculture and farming and solar at the same time? There were a lot of concerns about whether or not it's going to begin to drive prices up for that land, put farmers out of business, not be able to do the same. And could the two, were solar panels and the apparatus going to create eyesores for community? All kinds of liability concerns. And what we were able to do is take Farm Bureau, take the stakeholders that were involved in this, bring them collectively together, have those tough discussions at the table. And now the two are actually existing well. We were able to make some policy changes, worried about the remediation, obviously, with capture, utilization. If a solar company were to have to shut down, what happens with all of the stuff that's left out there? What's the remediation plan? So we were able to work with the legislature, work with stakeholders to create common sense policies. So now that the two industries can come together, work together, and move forward. That's what we have to do here. I mean, we know that there are folks that may not like to see as much of the traditional energy forms, but we have to sit down at the table, talk with them, and talk to them about the transformation, and that it's good for everyone.
Thank you. So important. And I do want to reemphasize that. I know with BASF, any projects that we do, expansions, new development, that engagement with those key community stakeholders is very much top of mind and front and center in all of our outreach too. So, Kristen,
y'all do a tremendous job with that, Blythe. Tremendous.
Thank you. Kristen, I think we have time for one more question for you, and then we'll see how we can get into some of the questions that have come across. So obviously we've heard a lot in the last 50 minutes around this and the multitude of options, both from energy and CCUS. And I guess my question for you is, what are the strategies for companies like BASF looking to expand in Louisiana? How do these technologies play into that expansion, right? Or investments in states? And then something I think you touched on lightly, but maybe even look at is it's not just the operations, it's the energy needed to produce those operations. So maybe touch on, I know that's kind of a broad question, but maybe in your last closing here, just kind of touch on how BASF looks at this totally for certain investments in not only Louisiana, but other areas.
Sure. So I'll say, if you were already looking to invest in Louisiana, what's happened probably at least in the last year or so is now you're looking to invest with deploying these technologies at the same time. Why? Well, because we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about what customers and what our communities are asking for, but also we've learned a lot about Louisiana. And we know that the ability to do things like carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration and do it onshore, where you only have a short transportation distance and you already have a pipeline of people coming into the workforce who know how to deploy these technologies, really makes you look at it seriously today. I'll also say coupling it with clean energy is another thing that I'm seeing. So a lot of companies who are looking to deploy things like CCUS, they're also looking to couple it with clean energy, whether that be renewable energy or something else that's emerging. I will say that is definitely also on the horizon, because all these projects are going to also need more energy. So of course you're going to go for the more sustainable solution that is at your fingertips. I'll also say, I think, it's bringing more investment. We've heard this already from Jason, but what Louisiana has, coupled with the incentives from the federal government, coupled with what the state has done, coupled with the opportunity of all the CO2 sources we have here closely in one corridor, you can say, from industry, you really have an opportunity to deliver large. And that's why I probably talk to a new company that has ambitions to do carbon capture sequestration almost every day now. In fact, they're coming from other regions. So where you want to maybe looking to invest in another region, you're now looking right here in the Gulf Coast. And a lot of people are looking specifically at Louisiana because of the great things that the state has done to also really advance us in being a leader. The support that we have with also the near hopeful, opportunity to deploy even more of the permits faster, and because of the year-over-year work put into it to do it the right way, really makes companies look hard at Louisiana. I also think we know that, especially with us at BASF, we know right now decarbonization projects typically come at a cost. Well, that near perfect geology right there that we have available really helps you with the incentives, with the increasing state incentives. It really helps you achieve your goals without significantly increasing your price of your products to your customers, which of course we want to give customers fair price and also deliver upon what they're asking for in terms of a carbon-free product. Also think that, right now, the United States, the fact that we have the opportunity to get an incentive to decarbonize is a gift, where other regions actually face a penalty. So of course you're going to be looking at this region. And just the opportunity that we have to really lead the nation, the fact that our universities, we talked about it earlier, have really jumped on board alongside all of industry, all of our government officials, our economic development teams. I mean, to have Louisiana State University create the first ever carbon capture curriculum for any university is exciting. I mean, students now can join that curriculum and right away graduate becoming prepared for the workforce of their future. And that's what we're really doing here in Louisiana. We've thought about it all. I think it's exciting to see that where once only maybe a few were talking about this, it seems like we've all come together from all sides of the table, and we're partnering to really advance everything in a strong way for people, for our planet, and for our community.
Thank you, Kristen. No, really, really good points. And a question we keep seeing up here is, have there been any projects announced for BASF on this, in this area? And I think to your point, you know, we're looking at a portfolio approach, nothing officially announced yet, but this is definitely something the company is interested in and quote unquote invested in because of the many opportunities that you just laid out.
Absolutely. There are many projects, not just in the space of CCUS, but clean energy, renewable energy. We have done a lot already in other regions. I say be on the lookout because things should be coming and evolving very soon, just because of all that we have to offer here in the Gulf Coast.
Very well said. And with that, I want to thank our panelists for being here today. And I can guarantee you this will not be the last conversation that we have on this topic, because as all three mentioned, a lot of exciting information, innovative technologies that's constantly evolving. I think we listed at least 10 different technologies just in this conversation alone today. And I know that's just the tip of the iceberg. So again, I want to thank them for sharing their expertise and their time with us today. I know some of the questions I was able to weave in. If I didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you individually. I just also want to thank Ben and Jessica and Catherine and the entire sustainability and the customer focused teams that we have at BASF. This has been a great series that they've put on, and a lot of recognition for that hard work. And then I want to thank all of you, our audience members who have joined us virtually. This, as I said, is an exciting topic. And I think it lends to the commitment that BASF has to not only collaborate with experts like Mr. DeQueer and Mr. Lanklow, but it ensures that we are putting the best minds like Kristen and solutions and effort to work towards that net zero goal that we have set as a company. So for that, I want to thank everybody for their time. And Ben, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Blythe. And I'd also like to echo and thank the speakers for being here today. I know there's prep time involved, there's time today, so we very much appreciate and value your time. So thank you for being here. I think just looking at some of the notes that I took, some of the carbon capture and sequestration projects, I mean, the amount of infrastructure that's involved, right? We talked about geology, we talked about pipelines, and we also talked about having the industry actually provide the CO2. So there are a lot of things that have to really come together to make that work. And then ultimately the business cases that make it work for companies. So I think bringing all that together is critical. I'm glad we had that discussion today. I hope others have learned as well as to what's required and how some of these things go. So I thought it was a great topic. So again, thank you for participating. So I think the last thing that I would like to mention is our survey. So I mentioned it before. Please, if you have a chance, provide us some feedback. It's that icon on the bottom to the far right, and we'd very much appreciate any comments that our audience members can leave there. I put up the schedule. We have an afternoon session. So we have our Sustainable Coffee session coming from Mexico City this afternoon. So please tune into that. And we're right at the top of the hour. So thank you to everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed it and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.